Hey y'all, what's up? Today we're going to be reacting to this head scratching interview that Ice Cube just did with Tucker Carlson. From Gangster rapper to Sellout. Stay tuned right after this and we'll give our thoughts. What's up, people? What's up? This is attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice, and with me I have
Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice.
we are live and we are the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every week, almost every week, but we try to do it every week. We provide leading analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture so that each and every one of you all who listen, who watch, who have a conversation with us, each and every one of you all can take this information and empower yourselves. So, Dad, happy Saturday. How's it going with you?
Happy Saturday to you as well, Chloe, and it is going well. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
It's going good. It's going good. It feels back. It feels good to be back in front of the camera. It's been a kind of a couple weeks since I've done this. But it's like riding a bike. You know, every time you get in front of the camera and express yourself, it feels good to be able to do this each and every week with you. And we have an exciting topic to go over today. And like I said, a head scratching one, because we were discussing what we're going to do this week. And both of us had seen and watched the Ice Cube interview that Tucker Carlson conducted. And we have some thoughts about it. So we want to react to that and have a conversation, right, Dad?
Yes, I watched the entire interview, and Chloe, right out the gate, I want to say it is amongst the worst interviews that I've ever heard a black celebrity give about racial issues. It is it is horrible, quite frankly, and I'm not being hyperbolic at all. It is terrible the things that Ice Cube said in this video. And the reason why I say that is because this is a space that I have been in for a long time. I've been studying issues related to race for many, many, many years. And as an attorney, we practice civil rights cases. We are constantly fighting for social justice. And quite frankly, the ignorance that Ice Cube sputtered in this interview is, as you said in the opening, a head scratcher.
Yeah. And look, mostly I'm sure everyone who listens to this and watches this knows who Ice Cube is, but for the few who may not, he is a rapper who is a product of the 80s. His government name is O'Shea Jackson, and he was in a group called NWA, Niggas with Attitude, that was very popular in the late 80s, the early 90s. He then was a solo rapper where he had his own albums. One that come I know off the top of my head is America's Most Wanted. America spelled with three K's. We'll talk about that later. So, and one of their most famous songs of NWA was "F the Police." So they came out the gate talking about these issues. They were gangster rappers from LA. So to have him go from that to the Hollywood persona that he has now, he then transitioned into becoming an actor and, rubbing shoulders with all of the Hollywood elite. I think that is what has, helped contribute from him going from a gangster rapper to the sellout that we call him, Dad. And the transition is just crazy. Like, if you followed, there was a very popular movie a few years ago based on NWA, and seeing the origins of that group and the topics that they talked about to what he's saying now, it truly doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, uh, I agree. Malcolm X said that the white community does not look to its celebrities and entertainers and athletes when it comes to leadership, when it comes to race matters, whereas the African American community does. And quite often, athletes, entertainers, folks in that space are not qualified to really have that dialogue. It's not that they are not intelligent. It's not that they are not conscious, woke. It's not that, but it's not a space that they spend a lot of time for the most part because they're so committed and dedicated to their fields of entertainment, whether it's singing, dancing, acting, being an athlete. It's not a put down, and there have been many great African American entertainers who have been very beneficial to the struggle for Black equality. People like Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, they were both strong supporters of Dr. King, and many others. And here in our generation, um, LeBron James, some others back in that generation, Jabbar, um, Jim Brown, um, and some others. But LeBron James, certainly Colin Kaepernick, but they are wise enough to sort of stay in their lane and not give these full interviews where they're trying to chop it up about race relations with a very known white supremacist. So I don't know what Ice Cube thinks qualifies him to have that conversation, but he clearly showed that he is not qualified for that conversation. And we're going to go over some of the interview here in a moment, and we'll point out to you why we say that.
Yeah, he's been making the rounds that I saw that he was on Pierce Morgan a couple days ago, and then he just did the Tucker Carlson interview, and he said that the reason why he went to those news sites is because other media would not have him on. I don't know how true that is, but he honestly has been talking like this for the past few years. A couple years ago, he was even criticized for either making a supportive statement of Donald Trump or going to the White House or something of that nature. So he's been talking like this for a few years, but now with this, especially with this Tucker Carlson interview, it's just put him in the limelight of, sir, what are you talking about? And the way that Tucker handled this conversation, we're about to play some clips. One, the questions were leading questions.
Uh-oh. Chloe has froze up. I hope she gets back. Um, well, anyway, hopefully she'll get back. But the last thing that she said was Tucker Carlson's questions were leading questions. I could not agree more. I could not agree more. Okay, here she is. So she's back. Sorry for that. Let's see if we can bring her back on without a major disruption. There she is. You froze.
I am back, guys.
Yeah.
Having some technical difficulties, but I hope everyone can hear and see me now.
Yeah, you're back. We can hear and see you.
Okay.
We're going to be working on preventing those freezes this week. So that shouldn't happen going forward. But Claude, the last thing you said is the questions were leading questions. What were you getting at with that?
The questions were leading questions, and Ice Cube's responses to the questions were just very juvenile, in my opinion. And so it made the whole interview very bizarre. And it just showed that he was not qualified to talk about this topic, especially when they got to race and politics. And we're going to show those clips right now, I think.
Let me just first of all shout out that comment about the questions being leading questions. That's exactly what they were. And in case
Hmm.
you all don't know what a leading question is, it's a form of question that we use as attorneys when we have sort of a hostile witness when we're cross-examining someone. Ice Cube was not a hostile witness in this case, but still, Tucker Carlson knew to ask the kind of questions that he wanted Ice Cube to give the answers that he knew Ice Cube would give. All right. Because when you ask leading questions, you always know the answer you should get, and you know what to do if you don't get that answer. We do it all the time when we're cross-examining witnesses, doing depositions, and so on. And it's a very astute observation that Tucker Carlson asked the questions and Ice Cube gave him the exact answers that he wanted. And we're going to see that here in this video. Man, I wish he would not have given this interview. Really, this was a horrible interview. This is a propaganda type interview. This is the kind of interview that white supremacists like Tucker Carlson will use. He already is using it. It's gotten over 1 million views. The impact and influence that Ice Cube has on the hip hop community, young African-American men especially, will take what Cube is saying as a reason to start supporting white supremacists. And so we're going to talk about it. We're going to get in it. So Chloe, if you want, we'll go ahead and start playing the video.
Yes.
Okay.
So why would you be doing this of all interviews? I mean, you could do an interview with anyone. You're doing an interview with me. Obviously, you're going to take abuse for doing that. Like, why would you do that?
Because I think it's silly not to talk to people. I think whether we agree or not,
right?
That has nothing.
All right. So, I mean, before we can get very far, we got to address that. He says he thinks it's silly not to talk to people. Well, sometimes it's not silly to refuse to talk to people. It's a very smart thing to do. We tell our clients all the time, do not talk to the police. Do not talk to prosecutors. Do not talk to detectives. Do not talk to claims adjusters. It's not stupid to not talk in many circumstances. And this is one of those circumstances where it was not stupid had Cube refused to talk. And let's look at a couple of things, Chloe, because I believe that Cube and a lot of these rappers, Lil Wayne comes to mind, certainly Kanye West comes to mind, and others. I believe in a lot of other Black conservatives, I believe they do this, that is, allow themselves to be used like this or even befriend white conservatives because they don't understand white supremacy. They don't really understand what that is all about. And also, many of them are wealthy, successful, and they see themselves in a way that's different from the average African-American person. I remember Lil Wayne giving an interview to this African-American sister, and she asked him about white supremacy and racism, and he got indignant. He's like, I'm a young Black man millionaire, so take that garbage somewhere else. In other words, I'm doing well. And if I'm doing well, that is proof there is no racism. So, stop. Don't ask me about racism. I'm beloved by white people all over the country, all over the world, maybe. Again, that comes, I believe, from two places. Someone who doesn't understand what white supremacy is, and someone who sees him or herself in a different place than the average African-American person. Now, let's, Chloe, define what white supremacy is. Let me put a definition on the screen for us. All right, white supremacy. It's a really important definition. White supremacy, this is from the Anti-Defamation League. White supremacy is a term used to characterize various belief systems, central to which are one or more of the following key tenets. Number one, whites should have dominance over people of other backgrounds, especially where they may coexist. So one of the tenets of white supremacy is that white supremacists believe they should dominate other people groups, especially where they coexist with those other people groups. Or it believes that whites should live by themselves in a white-only society. Or that white people have their own culture that is superior to other cultures. Or white people are genetically superior to other people. So those are some of the tenets of white supremacy, because I agree with the Anti-Defamation League that white supremacy can manifest in different forms. This definition goes on to say, as a full-fledged ideology, white supremacy is far more encompassing than simple racism or bigotry. Most white supremacists today further believe that the whole race is in danger of extinction due to a rising flood of non-whites who are controlled and manipulated by Jews, and that imminent action is needed to save the white race. And if I can put a diagram on the screen, this is a picture of a rattlesnake. I want to make the connection between white supremacy and a rattlesnake. Both are very dangerous. Both are sometimes very antagonistic, very adversary. Both are by nature territorial, and will bite and has a very destructive bite. And I'm going to come back to this connection between white supremacy and a rattlesnake throughout our discussion. But what are your thoughts about how the Anti-Defamation League characterizes white supremacy?
Yeah, I think it's very accurate because a lot of times people think in terms of just simple, okay, I'm not racist or I'm not bigoted or no one in my family is. But the way that white supremacy is defined in those definitions, just like it said, is more encompassing than just whether or not a person is racist or not. This, one of the things that we spoke about in our last video is how black people, what the powers that be want to do is not have black people think as a collective or as a community, but as individuals. And that's where they have a lot of success with these black conservatives who buy into the idea of white supremacy, that a lot of white conservatives espouse. So Ice Cube, Candace Owens, others, they often talk about just individualistic, just themselves. They have attain some type of financial wealth or other type of success. So it's like, okay, it's me as an individual and I'm different from the community. But everything that we talk about in that definition, it is white supremacy as a whole. So the white community as a whole, what their thoughts are in terms of the white race and other relations, and then black community as a whole, and what we need to do as a collective to create our own wealth and community and justice for ourselves. So I think that's where a lot of the black conservatives come into play. They fall into that white individualism, and Ice Cube, he'll talk about that in the clips that we play as well.
That's an excellent observation, and let me comment on that. First of all, white conservatives twist Dr. King's words up. to come out with this individualism. Where Dr. King said, I dreamed one day where my children will be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And white conservatives very cleverly and deviantly use those words to suggest that the country, our laws, etc., are colorblind. They use those words to also say, as you said, that we should not see ourselves as a group, but as individuals. Well, the problem with that is we are and have always been treated as a group in this country. The discrimination, the racism, the slavery, and all that was based on race. Jim Crow was based on race, systemic racism based on race, not individual people, but on a group, an insular group of people. So white supremacists, white conservatives essentially gaslight the issue of colorblindness and this group identity that they assail. And by the way, they behave as a group. They act like a group. They think as a group. They protect themselves as a group. But then they try to sell us on don't think of yourself as a group, but as individuals. It's ridiculous. And when we stopped the tape just then, Ice Cube said that he thinks it's stupid to talk with people. Well, let's go back. Let's go back to my illustration that white supremacy is like a rattlesnake. What happens if you talk to a rattlesnake? You get bit. You get bit in the mouth. You get bit in the face because you're dealing with a rattlesnake that to its nature is angry, is protective, is territorial, and it's going to bite you. And if I can borrow an illustration from the Bible, it's similar to when God told Adam not to eat from a particular tree. All the trees eat from it, but from a particular tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, don't eat from that tree. And he communicated that to Eve, his wife. Yet, what happens? Lucifer, in the form of a snake, slithers his way into the garden, begins to talk with the woman, and like Ice Cube, the woman reasoned. Ain't nothing wrong with talking. And that conversation has thrown the whole world in a complete mess, that one conversation. So again, as I said in the opener, there are some times where you don't need to talk to certain people. That was one of these times. So I'm going to keep going back to this rattlesnake illustration.
And with the rattlesnake, not only could the rattlesnake be angry, protective, etc., but fearful too, scared.
Wow.
And when
Wow.
animals get scared, they lash out. That's what
attack.
the rattle. That's what the rattle is for. The same with white America. Just like the ADL said in its definition, there's a lot of white fear for their race being overtaken, for minorities finally stepping into our equal rights. So what did they do out of fear? Lash out. And that's throughout the history of the United States since we were brought here in 1619 as well. So again, it may not even just be anger. It may not just be a hate for black people. It could be fear, and that fear causes white society as a whole, the white powers that be, to lash out, to do what Tucker does, and other white conservatives who have those white supremacist views, and use a bait. In my opinion, in this case, was Ice Cube, and he fell right into the trap. So yeah, sometimes you don't want to engage with someone, especially when their interests are different from yours. That's exactly what we were saying in the beginning when we advise our clients not to talk with police officers. The interest of a police officer or law enforcement is different from yours. That's why we say you don't need to talk to them, because the truth is not what matters most times. It's getting information, um, to be prosecuted. So all of this needs to come into play when we decide who we engage with and have these conversations with.
Very good. Let's go back to the tape.
Do with it. You know, it's like, this is what it's all about. Let's talk about it. Let's debate. And you know, I've been shut out.
Wait, that sounds like right-wing extremism and whataboutism.
But I've been shut out. You know, some platforms will not have me on.
Why?
They don't like that I'm, you know, an independent thinker. I'm not part of the herd. I'm not part of the go along to get along gang, so to speak. So,
Okay, so Ice Cube says that he has been shut out by, I guess, black media. He goes on to mention Oprah, The View, and some others. I guess because of his reaching out to the Trump administration when Trump was in office, with his contract with Black America. And so he says he's been shut out. And so that is a reason why, you know, he's open to talking to everyone. He also says that he's an independent thinker. So let's talk, let's negotiate, let's debate. Problem is, let me go back to my Adam and Eve example. Eve was no match for Lucifer. That was a conversation that could not go anywhere but where it ended up going. And that is with her being deceived, being used, because Lucifer used her to get to Adam, who was really the one he wanted to get to. And so Ice Cube is allowing himself to be used by white conservatives, white supremacists who have an agenda. And there is no negotiating with them. They're not going to debate. They're not going to negotiate because, as you said, for either fear or for just flat out white supremacist thinking, whatever it is, they're not about to change their mind. And how we know they're not going to change their minds? Because we have 400 years of history that teaches us. I love what I heard a historian say. You got to understand history in order to know your present. And once you know how you got where you got by understanding history, then you can strategize for your future. And Ice Cube is not looking at the benefit of history when he says that he's an independent thinker. In other words, I don't care what history says. I don't care what the scholars who actually study this says. I'm an independent thinker, and so was Eve. And again, that was the very reason why, that arrogant, I'm an independent thinker. And let me say that there is a time where we need to be independent thinkers. I don't mean to suggest that we all need to be a herd, that we are a monolith. But when dealing with a rattlesnake, you need to kind of stick with traditional, conventional wisdom. They will bite you, and their bite is lethal, can be. So yeah, great being an independent thinker, but be one who is an expert in this subject, which he's not. If you're talking about writing lyrics, writing bars, spitting lyrics, if you're talking about writing a great movie, if you're talking about that sort of thing, then Ice Cube is the guy to go to. But when you're talking about white supremacy, systemic racism, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he showed it in this interview, Chloe.
Yeah. And look, there's protection in the herd. When you have a group of animals, why do they run in herds in the first place? For protection. And typically the one that gets out of that protection is the one that is targeted, and taken down. And so when I'm talking about herd, I'm talking about the black community and the way that we were, um, after slavery, during Jim Crow, where the black dollars, you could go to a black doctor, black businesses, where we put our money together, and we started our own communities subsequently that were then, dismantled and experienced violence, a lot of times in the early 1900s. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the herd and needing to be a collective in the community. You know, we need to stick together for that protection. That's what other groups do when they come to this country. If you look at some of the Asian communities, what they do when they come together, other European communities, Latino communities, they stick together and they create their own wealth and, justice for themselves. That's what we need to do. We need to stop having what is the term, a crab in a barrel mentality, where when one of the crabs gets to the top, we're just going to forget about everybody else. And unfortunately, some black entertainers or black people who reach a certain amount of success, they tend to do that instead of pulling everyone else up. So Ice Cube, it's not always bad to be in a herd. There's protection there, and we can accomplish a lot of success by being in a herd and being a collective as well.
Wow, you hit the nail on the head there. You hit the nail on the head. Bam! That's exactly right. There is protection in the herd, right? Sometimes the herd frustrates you. Sometimes the herd is, certain members of the herd are, antagonistic toward you, and sometimes there's a fight in the herd, but there's still safety in that herd. You are right on target, right on target. Very good. Excellent. All right, so let's go back to the video and listen to this, what I would characterize as uninformed foolishness that's coming out of Ice Cube's mouth.
I'm an outsider, and so I'm not part of the club. So I have to go places for one that I'm welcome, and where I can voice my opinion without somebody, saying I'm a bad person and that they never want to have me on their platform again.
What platforms have banned you?
I've been, I tried to go on The View. They didn't have me on The View.
Why?
Well, a few of the guests just really didn't like where I was coming from. So, or a few of the hosts, I mean. So that's what I was told by the producers. I don't know if the producers was just copping out and using some of the hosts to not have me come on and explain myself, but
You'd be a good booking for them.
I've been on there before.
Yeah.
It's just when I've became an independent thinker, when I'm not, I don't follow their brand of politics, I guess.
But if you can't think for yourself, then you're not really free.
All right, so Ice Cube talks like he got this thing figured out, and everybody else, they don't know what they're talking about. So he's come up with his own way to deal with white supremacists, and for that he's being targeted, he's being attacked and shunned, etc. That is that's untrue. African Americans just know that, look, if you are befriending white supremacists like Tucker Carlson, and let's talk about Tucker for a second here, Chloe. We have done several shows on Tucker. Tucker is a blatant white supremacist. Tucker was such a blatant white supremacist, even Fox News cut their losses. We're talking about a guy who said that the George Floyd murder was a hoax, untrue. We're talking about a guy who has espoused on his Fox show before he got canceled this theory of white replacement, talking about this fear that you schooled us on here earlier. The guy is a total white supremacist, and I guess Ice Cube think that he can change his mind, reform him. I mean, that's just crazy on its face, because once again, what are we talking about? What are we dealing with? We're dealing with rattlesnakes. Sorry about that. Let me put it back on the screen here. We're dealing with rattlesnakes.
Yeah. And, Ice Cube keeps saying that he's an independent thinker. Nothing of what he's saying is that independent, and two, requires a lot of thinking. It's very service level. And I'm not trying to, just rag on Ice Cube in terms of, his thinking or intellect or anything. I'm just saying he's describing, so unique and so independent when is not that unique from what other black entertainers have come out and said who have the same beliefs, and it really does not require a lot of deep thinking. A lot of it, what it sounds to me, is he got his feelings hurt when some of these media outlets or some people he knew in Hollywood did not want to have him on and did not want to associate with him. So now he's like, I'm gonna go test out the rattlesnake. I'm gonna go be with them. Let me see what they talking about.
Yes, and he got bit.
Yeah.
He got bit, and they used him in this interview, and we're going to see how they did so in just a minute. Let me we got some comments here, Chloe. Do you
Okay.
want to let's talk about them?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right, I'm going to try to put it on the screen here. Let me see if I can make that happen. There it is. Yeah, let's put it up here and let's talk about it. Let's put it up here and let's talk about it. Yes, ma'am. So this commenter said, blank, 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 is this blank, blank, blank title? Haters hating on the truth. Ice Cube didn't say hardly anything that was true in this interview. If he was speaking truth, we'd be celebrating what he said. But there was very, very little truth coming out of Cube's mouth in this interview.
Period. There's really nothing to even say back to that comment. It's just funny.
Well, he goes on, or she goes on, how are you going to talk about crab in the barrel mentality with a title like this? Clickbait, thumbs down. Okay, so no, this is not clickbait. This is reality. Ice Cube was, as you pointed out, Chloe, a member of the NWA, and their signature song was Blank the Police. And all of a sudden, and he talked to Tucker about the police, and that's a very, very different Ice Cube than the one who wrote that song. Okay, he literally went from gangster rapper to sellout in the space of his career. Okay, so that's my response to this person.
In Clickbait, we in our title we say from gangster rapper to sellout, and we're going in detail, play by play, on why we believe um, he has become a sellout, and talking about various statements that have come out of his mouth with history and with analysis. So there's no clickbait here.
Nope, not at all. All right, back to the video.
No, you're not. You're not. But I've been excluded. I've been excluded on Oprah. You know,
On Oprah?
On Oprah, yeah, I've been excluded. Yeah, man.
I would think you'd be the person Oprah would want to promote. I mean, you grew up in South Central, you were successful at a young age, you have dignity, you say what you think. Like, I thought that was the goal.
Me too. You know, I don't know what it is, but, you know, several of my, you know, I had a movie called Barbershop, you know.
Yeah, I remember.
That I wasn't invited to participate with the cast. I produced a show called Black White, and it was a very controversial show. And once again, they had the whole cast on, but I wasn't invited. And so I don't know.
On Oprah's show.
Yeah, so I don't know what that's really
But Oprah's obviously a saintly, godlike figure who's revered by all decent people. Why would she exclude you?
I really don't know. You know, that's something that I would love to find out. But I can't tell you, you know, if there's a single thing that I've done or said to her.
Have you noticed that it is more controversial to criticize Oprah than to burn the American flag?
Really?
Seems that way. I've never heard anybody criticize Oprah. Do you think it's political or do you think it's deeper than that? I mean, you're not like a right winger.
No.
No? No. You don't even seem that political.
No, I'm not really. I'm pretty much, you know, just want to do right by the people, you know. So if that comes through political means, that comes through the private sector, wherever it comes, you know, I'm down to work with whoever's down to do something right for the people.
So I remember reading you say something along the lines of, I didn't vote for Trump, I'm not a Trump voter.
So doing something right for the people, I guess the best place, and I presume Ice Cube is talking about black people. So I guess he thinks going to Tucker Carlson and white supremacy is the best group of folks to go to when you want to do something for black people. I meant all the sarcasm you got in that that you got from that statement. I meant every bit of it. Pun intended. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
And you know,
go ahead.
This conversation they had about Oprah. I mean, who cares? Okay, Oprah is not the spokesperson for all of the black community. So it really just sounds like Ice Cube was hurt by one of the most powerful black people in Hollywood. And again, now he is going to these other outlets, Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan, to air that out. But in terms of, okay, being for the people, maybe you can school me or somebody else because he's a kind of a generation. I know him more as an actor. I don't know what he's really done for the people, for us, for black people. So if someone in the comments can let us know, please do. Dad, if you can.
Well, so Ice Cube and I are probably not too far apart in age. So I grew up with Ice Cube and NWA Cube and Dr. Dre and I think Ren, a guy named Ren, and several other guys. So, I mean, when they hit the scene, I mean, they really, really hit the scene, even with the name, like you said, Niggers with Attitude. That was something. So from that, I guess from that music and expressing what they were seeing in LA is what Dr. Dre said was the basis of their music. Again, the police brutality. We are talking about the city where Rodney King, the state where Rodney King and other, injustices occurred. So I guess giving voice to that disenfranchised, disillusioned group of African-American people is what he would say is his claim of fame. He is also the owner of the Big 3, 3-on-3 basketball league, and I heard him say that he feels like that's giving some of the older guys, some of that basketball league, what it does is it gives guys who played in the NBA the opportunity to play in his league 3-on-3 games. And so he's saying that's basically giving them the opportunity to sort of reinvigorate their careers. So maybe he's talking about that. What he actually does behind the scenes, I don't know. But in terms of what he has done publicly, I agree with you. I don't see a lot. So I don't know what he's referring to when he says wanting to do something for the people. In fact, one could make the argument that his music has been very derogatory toward the people and has had a bad impact upon the people. Some people could make that argument. But I agree with you. I can't point to anything specific that is public that he's done. Maybe behind the scenes he's doing some things. I don't know.
Yeah, he mentions a show called Black White. We need to do a reaction to that show, Dad.
I've never
Because
heard of it.
yeah, it's a show that came out, I think, in maybe the mid 2000s, where it was a black family, it was a white family. The black family went in whiteface, the white family went in blackface, and they wanted to experience how the other views the world and are treated. The issue becomes the black guy who goes in blackface, and the way that he treats it. He says the N word. It's just it's very
Did you
it's
mean the
not
white
very
guy
insightful.
in blackface?
Yeah, I meant white guy in blackface.
Yeah, you said black guy in blackface. I was getting ready to say, why is a
Oh,
black guy in blackface?
no, no, white guy, the white guy in blackface.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we need to do reaction to it. It's just it's I don't think it is sir. It's controversial, just like you said.
Okay. But to answer your question again, I'm not aware of anything he's done publicly. Um, I don't know what he does behind the scene. And again, to go to a den of rattlesnakes to try to get something done for black people, to me is preposterous.
Yeah,
That's the very thing they're working against. Here's some more of the
yeah.
interview.
Actually attacked Trump at one point, but you were willing to meet with Trump. Do you think that crossed a line?
I think some people didn't like that, but I think it's idiotic. You know, enemies meet.
Right.
You know, they talk. I'm pretty sure there's some communication between Russia and the Ukraine right now. Somebody's on the phone talking to somebody, trying to come up with a solution. So we just got to talk. That's the only way we're gonna work this out. You know, I know when the talking stops, the fighting starts. You know, a lot of people, they, think I'm.
Spoken like a real rookie, right? When the talking stops, the fighting starts. Dude, the fighting started years, decades, centuries ago. We've been in a fight. We're still in a fight. I mean, the country fought a civil war that never ended. So what are you talking about when the talking stops, the fighting starts? The fighting never stopped. And once again, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a rattlesnake when we deal with white supremacy. You don't talk to rattlesnakes. They don't talk back. They bite back. They don't talk. They don't negotiate. They don't debate. Back to the interview.
Republican. I'm a right winger. Just because I was willing to speak to the Trump administration, and I was willing to speak with the Biden administration as well.
Have you?
One guy in the administration, but it didn't go anywhere. It was basically a, take my temperature kind of call. We'll get to it, but they never got to it or never planned to. Matter of fact, the guy left the administration, so after talking to him for a year or so, he was gone, and then we were left really with no one to continue the conversations.
What do you think of Biden?
I don't think he's given the people who put him in exactly what they thought they were going to get from him.
But his most loyal voters, according to the polls anyway, are black voters, particularly black women. Mm-hmm. And those numbers don't seem to change. So no matter what happens or doesn't happen. So do you expect they ever will change?
Whether they become independents and not vote for anybody who's not bringing it. It's like people want your vote. They have to do something to earn it. If they don't earn it, why are you going down there and pulling that lever?
Because the other side hates you. That's the pitch they make. We may suck, but the other side hates you.
You're supposed to dance with the person you brought.
Yeah.
And the person that brought you to the dance, you guys are supposed to dance together. And if that doesn't happen, you got to go find another dancing partner before the night is up and the music's up.
Okay, let's lean into that. That's juicy, right? Go ahead.
So, they mention black women. We know that for Biden, especially in the primaries, if it were not for black women in, I believe, South Carolina, he likely would not have been the Democratic nominee and subsequently the president. And we know that black people as a whole, by and large, support or vote for the Democratic Party. Black women in large numbers, black men, they're starting to dwindle a little bit, but it's still 90 plus or the late 80s, 80% plus. And I think there's a reason for that. With LBJ and what was done in the middle of the 20th century with the civil rights movement, and the fact that it was a Democratic president that implemented a lot of the policies, the federal policies that still benefit us to this day, whether it be the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and other things that happened under the Democrats in the mid 1960s. We rewarded the Democrats with our votes. And we recognize that if it were not for the federal government and a lot of the injustices that we suffered, we would not be in the position that we are now in terms of the legislation that we received to help make us equal partners in this system. If we were left up to the states, like what a lot of Republicans and conservatives want, we saw what happened with the Civil War. So I think that's one factor that often gets overlooked. It's not that we are not independent thinkers whatsoever, because black women are some of the most educated block of people in this country, and we're continuing to do so. And we think a lot, and we're very intellectual. I think it's a product of the loyalty that the Democratic Party got from us because of what it did in the 1960s. Now, in terms of that, what he said about, okay, well, when your partner starts dancing with you, you need to go find a new partner. I somewhat agree with that. I do feel like the Democratic Party as a whole needs to do more to espouse Black issues, to espouse legislation that will benefit Black people, to espouse legislation that will put equity back on the table with us as a community. They need to do more. So I slightly agree with him on that. But turning to Tucker Carlson and these other white candidates on that side is not the solution. We need to go within ourselves and internally, and go back to us as a collective to demand it, not turn to the rattlesnake.
I'd be interested in knowing what some of the commenters think about that point. What you said was just very superbly stated. Very, very a great analysis of why African Americans, particularly African American women, are loyal to the Democrat Party. But at the same time, Cube is right that Black folks should leverage their votes and demand more. I want to go back. You covered that part of his statements very well. Let me go back and address his analysis of Joe Biden and his suggestion that folks maybe should not vote at all if you're not getting what you want to get from your politician. So Joe Biden has a history with the African American community, and it's soiled in places, right? The 1994 Crimes Bill Act largely, and he acknowledged this, it had a big impact. It really sort of brought on the mass incarceration that we see in the African American community. He finally acknowledged the role that he played in that, and so he has a soiled, checkered past with the Black community. And as you stated, and we are talking about, on the other hand, we are talking about someone who served the first Black president faithfully for 8 years. And so here are some of the pros of Biden. Another one is, as you said, if it wasn't for the Black vote in South Carolina, he probably would not have made it beyond that primary. What has Black folks gotten in exchange for that? I would argue quite a bit. Not enough, and he has 2 more years to continue repaying us for that support, but quite a bit. And let me be specific. So we got the first African American female vice president. That's big. We got the first African American female Supreme Court justice. That is huge. We got the first African American Secretary of Defense, Lord Austin. We got the first African American to lead the EPA. Very important given all the environmental racism that Black folks deal with. We got the first Black female press secretary. Pretty big. We got a Black woman who's over, I think, the budget office. Pretty big. We got Kristen Clark, who is over the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, which is doing a tremendous job fighting police brutality and other forms of racism in the country. So the argument, and then there are a bunch of other things, policy things that my wife and I, your mom, we were discussing this morning that the Biden administration has done. There have been a whole lot of federal judicial appointments who are Black. So we're getting some stuff for our votes. Okay, we're getting some stuff for our votes. And when I say I'm talking about the Black community. I'm not suggesting that either you or me are Democrats or that we voted for Biden. What I'm suggesting is the Black community, as you said, there's a good reason for the Black community to have voted for Joe Biden over a white supremacist like Donald Trump. Absolutely. No one, we don't have to even explain that. In terms of not voting when your party affiliation, in terms of Black folks not voting because the Democrats don't do this or the other, I think is preposterous. Because when Black folks don't vote, you can count on the GOP winning. And when the GOP wins, we get what we got. We get a Donald Trump. We get 6 right-wing conservative justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. We get all types of policies to turn back civil rights legislation, the Voting Rights Act, and so forth and so on. So when you weigh out whether the Democrats should be doing more versus what the GOP will do if they get in office, to me, that's a no-brainer. Sometimes you vote because you're voting against the other person who will do you tremendous harm if him and or her and his tribe gets in the office.
Yeah. And just like you said, that you vote. Sometimes you vote to keep the rattlesnake out, and a lot of people did that in 2020 when Biden was elected. So, I mean, I love how you just laid out too all of the people in Biden's cabinet that he appointed who were black. And let's not forget, like you mentioned, the judicial appointments, the number of black judicial appointments that he has put in the federal judiciary, with the top being Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who has just done an amazing job while she's been up there. Her dissenting opinion in the affirmative action case we went over, it was amazing. So he's done a lot. I think the bigger question is, in order to get more done from the Democrats, we need to be a collective and demand it with ourselves, not just simply switch to the rattlesnake in order to get it.
Very good. Before we go back, let's put another couple of comments on the screen. Don Carrington says, black women put back office, who to blame, makes it make sense. Lock up your husband, inaccurate. Some of that I didn't get. Your sons make it make sense. You vote for him. I read this comment to say that black women should not have voted for Biden. Do you read it that way?
That's how.
That's the gist of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, we just went through that. If I have the opportunity to vote for a rattlesnake versus a turtle, right? The turtle is slow, and I want the turtle to do more and do it quicker. But it's a whole lot better than voting for the rattlesnake, who will get in office and start biting you like crazy. We've seen it. I mean, history is our teacher, right? We know, and we're educated, we know that there was a time when the Democrat Party was the old Dixiecrat Party that supported slavery and did so for several centuries. And then the big switch occurred, where a lot of the Dixiecrats followed Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms into the Republican Party and Barry Goldwater. So now the GOP, the party of Lincoln, the party that actually brought about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the end of slavery, has now been hijacked by the Confederate Party, the white supremacists. And it makes no sense for African Americans to vote in the party of the Confederate, the anti-black GOP party. That makes no sense, nor does it make sense to not vote and allow that party to come in and do you harm, Ice Cube. That makes no sense. I'll say for the record, Chloe, you can say if you want, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. I'm neither one. I have voted both ways. In this current climate, I will not vote for the GOP. Again, just anti-black. This is the party that has written into one state's teaching instructions that slavery benefited black people. That's definitely not the party that I nor any other black person should support, in my opinion. Sister Ave. Sister Ave. Sister Ave says, when you don't vote, you get the GOP who disrespect and disregard you.
Ain't that the truth?
Succinctly stated. Point blank.
Period.
All right. We're running out of time, and there are a couple of things that I want to make sure we hear that Ice Cube says. I want us to hear, Chloe, his comment on Kamala Harris, and then I want us to hear his comment about racism, whether it still exists today, and that'll conclude today's show. So I think he's going to talk about Kamala next, and then I'm just going to try to find where he started talking about race. Sounds like a plan?
Sounds good.
All right.
What do you think of Kamala Harris?
I mean, obviously she's a great politician to be able to become the vice president of the country. I don't know how effective she is at her job.
What's your view of the police at this point?
It's the same, you know. It really is, you know. It's like looking at, like, what's your view of the military? Like, they're the military. They're always gonna be the military. If I asked you this in 1946, you'd be like, they're the military. Yeah. So it's a fraternity.
Before we let him finish about his complete 360 on the police, in my opinion, what do you think about his comment about VP Harris?
He didn't really say much. He just said that, well, he said that she's a great politician without acknowledging, you know, the accolades that she possessed before she became vice president, like being the attorney general of California, you know, the top prosecutor of the largest state in the country, and everything else that she did before. But other than that, he seems just to view her with, I would say, is not positive or negative. So he didn't really go into much detail about it, in my opinion. Did you get something different?
I got something slightly different when he says that she hasn't been effective. I don't know what he's expecting of a VP. I mean, she serves at the pleasure of the president. She can't, promote her own agenda. The White House sort of controls her. So she does what she does to support the man at the head of the ticket. And I think it's an unfair characterization to say that she is an ineffective vice president. But, I mean, it kind of goes with par for the course. The vice presidents tend to not get a lot of respect because, again, they're serving at the pleasure of the other person. I do appreciate her going down to Florida recently and addressing DeSantis, very strongly about the teaching standards there regarding slavery. But to say that she is ineffective, I think, is at least premature and presumptuous not to know, the inside workings of the White House with her office and, the kinds of things that Joe Biden wants her doing and not wants her doing and not wanting her to do. So I think that was a little shade that he threw off at her there without knowing the facts. I'm generally protective of VP Harris, although I strongly disagree with her on some policy issues. She's first Black female. That's a huge accomplishment, a historical, unprecedented accomplishment that gets a lot of credit in my mind and heart. She's an HBCU grad. That's big to me. I went to A&T and Central, A&T and Howard University where she attended. were in the MEAC conference. So she's like a fellow HBCU person. So I'm a little bit protective of her. And so I thought he threw a little shade.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a little critical of VP Harris. I recognize that in her role, I mean, she doesn't have a lot of inherent power. A lot of her power comes from what the president wants her to do. But it does seem like she'll pop up here and there, but she's not as visible as even Biden was in his administration. And so I don't know if that is because Biden didn't want her to overshadow him. uh, I don't know the reason for it, but I do think that she should be more visible, um, and try to focus on some issues herself, even if they're outside of the Biden administration.
That's fair. That's very reasonable. Um, you know, how the White House handles her schedule, if it does, or how it does, or how much it does, I'm not sure. And because of that, I'm reluctant to say any more than that. Okay, let's go back to, and I think I may have to fast forward to get to the place that I want us to get as we come to a close.
It's an organization that does things a certain way. And I think their philosophy sometimes is detrimental to the people they're serving, because I think cops have a win and make it home philosophy. Win whatever battles you have in the street, make it home at night. And that's actually the most important thing. And everything else, people's rights, doing things the right way, being totally fair and square all the time and not, being a little aggressive, all that comes second to win the encounter, make it home at night. And you can't really fault somebody for thinking that way as a police officer, but that's the philosophy, so everything else comes second to that.
Wow. Now that is a huge difference than the man who wrote Blank the Police. He's now saying, and it's important what he didn't say. Okay, it's important what he didn't say. But he's now saying that, hey, I understand their attitude is I want to get home to my family. So I kind of understand that. And so, I get it. I understand why the police are out here shooting people, because they're trying to get home. And you can understand, people thinking that way. That is why we named this From Gangster Rapper to Sellout, because it has been proven that race plays a huge factor in policing across this country. And for Cube not to even acknowledge the impact of race on policing in this country is a head scratcher.
Just to read a couple of the lyrics, that this is
Good.
Ice Cube and F the Police. F the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown. And not the other color, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. F that, cause I ain't the one for a punk with a badge and a gun to be beaten on and thrown in jail. We can go toe to toe in the middle of a cell. Messing with me cause I'm a teenager with a little bit of gold and a pager. Searching my car looking for the product, thinking every dude is selling narcotics. You'd rather see me in the pen than me and Lorenzo rolling in the bins. Be the police out of shape. So he goes from that to, well, they're just trying to make it home. I mean,
that justifies the title right by itself. Thank you for reading those lyrics. Absolutely.
So yeah.
Abe says, just because you want to get home at night does not make it okay to mishandle the community. That is just foolishness. Amen.
Yes. Yes.
Wee Ray, hello, respect from Charlotte. Hello, Charlotte. Hello, Wee Ray. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your comments. Please, come back next week. Follow the channel, subscribe, like, share, comment. We appreciate it so much, so much, so much, so much. Yeah, Chloe, thank you for reading the lyrics. I think that really brings it home. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the interview, but I'm gonna fast forward. It's gonna throw it off a little bit because I'm gonna try to get to this one place where I think we need to end this. Some things. He said some things that absolutely shows he was disqualified to do this interview. Just a second.
So, guy might not care if he violated. I have to be ready for that. It's a bit. You're just running around looking for the exit in this of the racist fighting that we all have in our lives who are same race. It don't work like that.
We've been talking almost all day now. You haven't mentioned race a single time. We've mentioned economics, rich and poor, a number of times. Do you think that we overplay the role of racial conflict in American life?
Yes. I think race, it takes up too much space. There's people that we all have in our lives who are same race that we can't stand. And there's people in our lives from other races that we get along with way better. So it's not about race. It's not about color and gender and this and that.
When I heard that, Chloe, that was proof positive that Ice Cube was not qualified to comment on race and to have this conversation. It played right into the hands of Tucker Carlson and white supremacists. It endeared them to him to say the things that he just said about race. And I want to show why. So let's rehearse what he said. He said that race is overplayed because there are some people in your own race that you don't like and some people in the other race that you do like. So it's not about race. It's not about race. Now, what he did was his comments are based on two errors. He made two errors in those comments that shows how disqualified he is to have this conversation. Number one, he talked about individual racism. He talked about people you know as individuals in your race that you don't like and people that you know from other races, individuals that you do like. And then he came to his conclusion based on those anecdotes, just the people you know or don't know or don't like in your life. We don't base our discussion of race on either individual racism or anecdotes. When we do that, we're going to reach the wrong conclusion every time. And here's why. Let's go now to our screen. And I want to bring up a definition or two. What is systemic and institutional racism? Systemic racism is composed of intersecting, overlapping, and codependent racist institutions, policies, practices, ideals, and behaviors that give an unjust amount of resources, rights, and power to white people while denying those same resources, rights, and power to people of color. Institutional racism is a set of practices or institutions divorced from individual beliefs, divorced from individual beliefs or attitudes that by design or otherwise have a differential impact on various racial or ethnic groups. It upholds white supremacy. It is really, really, really important to understand the difference between systemic and institutionalized racism versus individualized racism. It is true that we all know folks in the black community, as black folks, we know black people we don't like. And we know white people that we like better than some black people that we like. That is true for everybody, I would presume, most people at least. But because of that, that is no reason to conclude, based on that racism is no longer a factor in this country, because clearly it is. It is a factor systemically. It is a factor institutionally. It is a factor systemically, structurally, and it's also a factor individually, because there are a whole lot of individual races. But those are not the ones that we focus on, because they don't do as much damage as having racist policies, racist practices, racist procedures that no matter who is in the organization, the results are still going to be bad for black folks because the policies are racist. You could have a good white person implementing the policy that hurts black people. So the fact that he didn't even address systemic racism or institutional racism and based his conclusion that racism is no longer a factor on anecdotal individual people, that is proof positive he should not have engaged in this discussion, especially, period, but especially where race is concerned. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he played right into Tucker's hands with that leading question, to the effect of race doesn't play as huge a deal on society, does it? Yeah, you're right. It wasn't an open-ended question. What are your thoughts on race? Or, um,
Man,
you
you're so
know,
right. I mean, he led him right into that.
let him right into it. And then just to say, well,
But hold on,
there's
Chloe, hold on. What you said is so important. He did not ask him an open-ended question. I mean, expound on that versus leading him to the conclusion that Tucker wanted him to express.
so by Tucker asking these leading questions, one, it makes Tucker the star of the interview, not Ice Cube, but what Ice Cube's views are. Why? Because when we're doing leading questions, we are controlling the narrative. That is the whole purpose of leading. And the focus is on us and when I say us, I mean attorneys when we do it. So Tucker had his narrative. He's the star. He's laying what he thinks the truth of the facts are, and he's getting Ice Cube to agree with it. Instead of asking Ice Cube open-ended questions where it would be all of what Ice Cube thinks and Ice Cube giving an analysis and narrative and breaking down the question, well, what are your views on race? That is an open-ended question that would allow Ice Cube to expound on what his views on race are versus, well, race doesn't play a huge role in society, does it? It one puts the spotlight on the questioner and asks and has a narrative with it. The other puts the spotlight on the person answering and does not have a narrative with it. And that is what continued to occur all throughout this interview, and Ice Cube played right into it. So instead of Ice Cube saying, "No, I believe that race still has a huge impact on society today, and even though their individual racism may have decreased, there's still systemic and institutional racism." He didn't do that. He just continued to play right into Tucker's hands. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for expounding on that. And I thought that Ice Cube said that he wanted to negotiate and debate. He didn't do either in this interview. He agreed with everything Tucker said. Every
Right.
leading question that Tucker put on the table, he already knew what Ice Cube was going to say. What do you think about Biden? Well, he's not fulfilling his promise to the black community. What do you think about Kamala? Well, she's ineffective. Do you think race is being overplayed in the country? Yes, race is being overplayed in the country. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, he was Tucker's ventriloquist dummy, literally. And that's, you know, it was a sad interview to allow himself to be done that way. But what do you expect when your expertise is writing lyrics and producing great movies and, you know, great songs? I don't listen to his music. I did years ago, but I haven't so I'm not a fan of his music. Certainly like most African Americans, I enjoyed Friday and Next Friday, and then I think Friday After Next. Those were funny movies with Chris Tucker and Debo and so forth. But that's your lane, Cube. Your lane is not in this race space. You don't know what you're talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We saw that. And he allowed himself to be Tucker's mouthpiece, a white supremacist. Cube was his mouthpiece. So for that reason, Chloe, our conclusion is he got used in this interview. If he truly expressed where he is on this thing, he has definitely gone from gangster rapper to sellout.
It's obvious. The clips and his words speak for themselves. So we encourage you all to listen to the rest of the interview so you can see exactly what we're saying. We just took out a few clips, but unfortunately, yeah, our conclusion is accurate. He went from gangster rapper to sellout. I do want to put in you all's mind frame that next week, next Thursday at 7 Central Time, I am going to be having a great conversation with a employment and labor attorney, and we're going to be analyzing the Hollywood writers and actors strike and why you should care, and why what happens there can have an impact on the black community. You don't want to miss this conversation. It's going to be really good. We'll put more information in the community tab. We'll promote it. But next Thursday, 7 Central Time, be there or be square.
And maybe also next week, I don't know if you all have pinned down the date just yet, but you, your mother, and a couple of other guests, a pediatric nurse with like 40 years of experience, a doula who's involved with at-home births for African-American women, and an African-American woman who had her children at home are going to join you and your mom, and you all are going to talk about the disproportionate number of Black mothers who died during childbirth, or children who died during childbirth. And it is, it just shows the systemic racism in the healthcare system. So you all are going to have that conversation as well. So we got some nice things lined up for you all. This thing with the employment lawyer who's going to talk about, as Chloe said, that strikeout in Hollywood and how that's impacting many African-American writers and actors, etc. And why so many Black women die during childbirth. What can be done? What kind of tips? What can we, not just Black women, but Black children as well. So all of that, I think, is going to be happening next week.
The black systemic racism with the women, that's going to be the second week of August, and the Hollywood strike is going to be next week.
Okay. All right. So one is happening. Your talk with the employment lawyer is happening next week, and then you and your mom are going to have this conversation about black mothers dying disproportionately, black mothers and babies, the week after that.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's get a few comments before we get out of here.
Yes.
Sister Ave, I can't even believe Ice Cube is downplaying race. He has lost my respect, mine too, by the way. I can't even believe he's giving Tucker the time of day. Good grief. Amen.
Yep.
My sweetheart, your mother, yes, it's unbelievable for him to say it's not about race when this country made it about race and continues to make it about race. And it's systemic racism that is of great concern, not just individual racism. Amen, sweetheart. Amen. Amen. We must distinguish systemic racism from individual racism. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And We Ray says, I haven't heard the interview yet. Racism is a big issue. I never recognized racism until I had kids. I enrolled my children into a better learning environment, and then it started to happen. Yes, yes. We Ray, thank you for that comment. And as I said earlier, please come back, subscribe, like, share, comment. And we have this every week. We have these kinds of discussions to educate the Defiant Lawyers family, the rebels we like to call, the legal rebels we like to call you all. So listen, without further ado, Chloe, you got any last comments?
Nah, we'll see you all next week.
All right, we're out. Thank you all. Peace, love. Bye.
That Corbin and Corbin legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. A team that has your back in the courtroom. Two well-spoken black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbin, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple. To obtain the favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most